Hey everyone, super quick before we jump in here. Here, of course, is the full deck list. You can scan the QR code, go to Eggman Events, and then you can export for the sim, do whatever. But just wanted to say a huge thank you again to Bono for joining me for this video. One thing was that same day, because I tried to get an interview with him, and I super appreciate him taking the time. His grandma, unfortunately, did pass away the same day as the Treasure Cup, so they've been handling all of that. But just wanted to give, a huge shout out to him and his family during this time, and of course, to Grandma Bono. So I couldn't have done it without them. And sending my condolences to the family. But he took the time, and we're gonna go ahead and jump in. What's going on, everyone? Vampyr Gaming here, and I am joined by Bono, who, if you remember my tweet, you would have saw. He's the Zoro Sanji player that made it all the way to the finals in the Versus Treasure Cup this past weekend, finishing out 4th place, locking in the serial Zoro. Incredibly honored to have you. I'm incredibly excited to be able to talk about this deck because I know I've played, a guy at my locals actually has played this deck, and I've come to know, I'm like, this deck can be menacing. Once you start rolling, you don't stop, and there's nothing you can do. So once the ball gets rolling, it just snowballs very quickly. So I'm semi-familiar with the deck because I've played against it a number of times. I know just how scary it can be. But how are you feeling fresh off of that top 4 locking in that serial Zoro?
I'm feeling awesome, man. I thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I have been a big fan of this leader ever since his introduction. I started playing it competitively probably back in 8.5 whenever the Dolphy deck came out. I played it with the Warlord package, and I had a really awesome play where you could play Jinbei on 4 into Mihawk into Cavendish, or one of the laws in the deck, and that was really awesome back then. But yeah, this is my best placement, and I'm really excited about the deck and where it is in the current meta.
Awesome. Well, yeah, congrats on the finish. Do you recall your matchups from the weekend? I also have them here if you'd prefer me to go through them.
Yeah, so I know my first 3 matchups were Emu. And then I believe I played an Ace, a Zoro, maybe another Emu, another Ace, and then the rest were Emus.
Yes, that is. Yes. And then I think a couple of things here, right? Did you didn't win a lot of dice rolls. It was I think about 50-50-ish.
No, yeah, that's one thing about this deck that I feel like the way I have it currently built is that you can go first or second and feel relatively comfortable with your lines of play. For anyone wondering, if you do win dice roll, depending on your opponent, you may want to take away their curve. But if you don't know the matchup and you just want to know what the best curve for Zoro is, in my opinion, it's going first.
Got it. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and jump into this deck here. I know it's kind of got a template, right? But I think there's the deck kit is a lot of expression. There's a lot of good blue cards, a lot of good.
Yeah, part of the reason that I like the deck so much is because I believe that the color combination is one of the most synchronous color combinations in all of the One Piece, really. I don't think
outside of black and blue.
Outside of black and blue, you are absolutely right.
Anyways, yeah.
But yeah, in this current format with the current ban list, I think that the ability to spit out bodies, which and any other deck that has that, like Luffy or Zoro, it costs you hand advantage. But in this deck, because of your access to cards like Cavendish and Vivi, that hand advantage can be easily replaced. And so if you want, we can get right into the deck list.
Yeah, it would be my pleasure. Absolutely excited to hear about it.
All right, awesome. So for starters, we have one searcher in the deck, and that's going to be Perona. The really cool thing about Perona is that even though she is 1 cost and cannot be targeted by the leader ability to bounce a 2-cost character and then restand a 7,000 power or less character, she is often recycled off of Law. Corona is a top 5 searcher that lets you search out Slash, and what a lot of people don't know is that Vivi is actually a Slash character, so it is a target that you can search off of Corona.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but it makes sense because when she was Miss Wednesday, she had the spinny rings, so that checks out.
Yeah. So I'm glad they gave her that typing. It does a really great job of replenishing your hand, and it really fuels your ability to see the cards that aren't searchable in the deck. Um, so following that up, obviously, is Vivi. Vivi, if you're a multicolored character on play, it lets you just draw 2 cards if you have 5 cards or less in hand. And the reason that this is so strong in my deck list is because it allows you to counter aggressively and protect the characters you have on the board, and then kind of be secure in doing that, because then you could just draw 2 back with Vivi, and with leader ability, you bounce her back to hand, and she's protected, and you just be played again. So seeing 1 Vivi is all you need to see for the entire match.
That makes sense. Yeah, because I was wondering why you ran 3, but also it makes sense, especially since she's Perona searchable. Another thing is it is so crucial. The most crucial thing in this deck is, of course, having a body, which was like when Lucci was around, it created a lot of problems because it's like, okay, if you can't stick anything, you're not going to be able to snowball. But once you have a character established, you can snowball with that character alone because it's going to swing twice every turn. So even if they get rid of another character, that character is still swinging twice. You have characters that can generate value like the Cavendish and just so many more things, or even you can just restand it, right? Like you have blocker law, but protecting those bodies on board, since you don't play very strong bodies because of the requirement of 7k or less, you typically are like more low to the ground, especially in like this top heavy format. Those, countering out, protecting those bodies is just incredibly crucial.
Yeah, and to that point, I think the kind of the underrated star of the deck, in my opinion, and the card that I will look for over any other card is Mihawk. Mihawk does exactly what you just explained, which is make sure that there's a body on the board that can be bounced and puts out multiple characters at the same time. In this deck list, I have 3 targets to target off of Mihawk. Mihawk's ability, in case anyone's wondering, is on play if you have 2 cards or less on the field, or 2 characters or less on the field, you could play out a Slash type or a Muggy Kingdom type character with a cost of 4 or less. So that brings in 4 copies of Cavendish, 3 copies of Zoro, and then 2 copies of Arlong, which are my primary targets to play off of Mihawk. The Cavendish is when attacking once per turn, you get to draw 2 and then discard 1, which obviously is +1 in hand, and that is awesome because you can always restand him and keep him from being swung on, or just swing again for 6k. And then Zoro, another underrated card in this deck, allows you to restand 2 Dawn on play, which, if you're tapping out when you play Zoro, it allows you to restand enough Dawn to be able to use leader ability, because leader ability does require that you have a Dawn attached. And it also allows you to play out cards to protect your Slash type characters like Kushiro. So you could always play out a Zoro, restand 2 Dawn, and then play Kushiro to protect your board.
Yeah, Zoro's busted, low-key. That card gave me a lot of problems this weekend. But, just because you can never answer it, which is, again, the biggest pro, right? Because you need a body, so then they can't just swing into it.
And the turn effect is not negotiable. It has to be restood. So even if you forget to do it, it will be restood.
yeah, you have to rewind the game state. Yeah, it's not, yeah, exactly. The card's so strong. It is so strong.
It is so strong. Yeah. The last 4 cost card is a bit of a tech. It's going to be Arlong. Now, last set I ran this card. A lot of lists ran this card in the East Blue version of Zoro Sanji, because it did such a good job. But the reason I decided to put it back into the deck, because I did take it out when I was doing my first playtest with this leader for this set, is actually for Ace.
Really?
One of the biggest things.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because he goes 8k, 10k leader, and you can just stop all of that, right? Like,
exactly. When you're presenting your opponent with so if your opponent's going into their 8 Dawn turn and they plan to use the I Am Whitebeard event and take their own life to make themselves 8k, if you prevent them from attacking that turn, it really makes them reconsider whether or not they want to take that life. Then they can't swing on you, so you protect yourself that way. And also, it makes them consider like, all right, well, maybe I don't even play the event this turn. And just keeping that big body off the board and keeping them at 6K so that you can swing into them over and over and over again, it's a huge advantage.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I mean everything. I really like Arlong. What was it? There was one set and my opponent Arlonged me, and I was just like, ooh. I don't even remember, but I know like it is so relevant, especially like when you power up your leader. It's stopping an 8K swing. It's stopping this. It can even stop like lethal. If you have one blocker, no life, right? You have leader and a character like that's in a swing you count on. He can take it away in end game. Like there's just so many different, and Zoro too. It just completely like Zoro gets nothing. Zoro loses 2 swings.
It stops his momentum. It keeps him from attacking your board. It allows you to but sometimes against Zoro, like you don't want to make it easy for them, and you won't swing the second time and have your character rested so that they're not forced to play out a Kuina or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It allows you to just go ahead and swing. Go ahead and swing because your characters are protected. In my 5th round against Zoro, which was streamed in the Versus stream, Arlong was really the MVP of that match. Not only that, but if you go second and you play Luffy, you restand for Dawn and you're able to play Arlong and just get those 2 kind of big bodies on the board that not only stun your opponent so he can't get a life off of you, it allows you to almost guarantee that you're going to have multiple swings that next turn because it's really hard to answer a 6 and a 4 on the same turn unless you use all your Dawn for Gravity Blade, but there's not a lot of blue in the format other than Ace. I think he only runs 1 in most lists.
Yeah, and a big thing too, right, that I think kind of contributes to this. Of course, there's Mars, but Mars is like it's still very expensive. They have to do it at 6 Dawn. They have to be there to be able to play it. So that's the only real removal card. There is, of course, Atmos and Jozu as well, but it's not like, we're not in a Lucci format. We're not in a heavy control format overall, which I think also creates a unique opportunity for this deck because, again, the crucial thing is just sticking that first body. I mean, it's very similar to with like Ace. Just sticking that first body really allows you to snowball in this deck.
And not irrelevant is the trigger effect on Arlong, which is, trigger rests up to one of your opponent's character with a cost of 4 or less. In Emu, that's going to go ahead and target Workery. You rest the blocker and keep it from drawing a card next turn.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Some added value to Arlong comes in what, if Mihawk is the surprise MVP of the deck, then the actual MVP of the deck is Vanderdecken. Vanderdecken's effect is on play. You may trash 1 Fishman type card from your hand, or 1 Arc Noah from your hand or field, and KO one of your opponent's rested characters. And that's really crucial because it doesn't have a cost associated to it. It's just any character that is rested. Period.
Yes, I would love to know.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, you're all good. I would love to know because I want to say my friend Noir, you might be familiar with him. I don't know if you're on Twitter or not, but he got top 64 playing Zoro Sanji at the Treasure Cup in Europe, and he opted to not play Vanderdecken, which, like, again, to your point, right, you have a couple of things that really make it work. It costs a card in hand, but you can remove any rested character. So if they take the block, you can play a Vander and then just, boom, blow them out. And then you also have Vivi, which is going to regenerate that hand advantage, and it puts you in Vivi range as well. And then to boot, you can... you can bounce Vander? He's a 2?
Yes, he has 2 costs.
Yeah, so you can bounce him as well, which allows you to continually replay him, which means you only need 1. But then you can do, in a turn, if they have 2 rested Newgates because they swung, you could, in theory, remove 2 10-drops for a measly amount of Dawn while also swinging twice. So, like, it creates a lot for so little. And then you could even, like, to boot, play a Vivi because you need 2 to swing. You need 2 to play it, 2 to play it again. You need 3 to play Vivi, 1 for your leader. So that's only 8 Dawn, and you can draw those cards back. Like,
yeah. And one other thing is that this deck, it can be at times very difficult to navigate because you have to strike this balance of keeping your hand between 5 and 6 cards. 6 so that you can play VV and then have 5 cards in hand for the effect.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, if you have cards like Cavendish or Law or Hody in your hand, you don't have enough, or Arlong, you don't have a way of getting rid of those cards in order to be able to get the effect off of EV. And Vanderdecken does a really good job of answering the math. You play Vanderdecken and you toss a Hody, or you toss an Arlong, or you play Arlong and you toss a Cavendish, or you toss a Luffy, and it frees up your hand to be able to draw into more counter.
Yeah, exactly. Now, is it really, because did this come up in Zoro? Because, of course, Law, that you play Law, you play out Arrested Tashigi. Are you Vanderdecking the Tashigi on, like, your 7? When is Vanderdecken, like, coming up in what matchups?
The biggest matchup that is most important in is going to be your ace matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, with the I Am Whitebeard, they're going to get that 10 cost blocker out there. And then 2 things happen. If your opponent is aware that you have Vanderdecken, whether you used it earlier or they just know that it's a popular card on the deck list, they may hesitate to use the blocker. And whether you have it in hand or not, if they aren't using their blocker to avoid it, then you might as well have it. Like, it's already done its job if you're playing around it.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I can see, because they just, and they cheat out big bodies and you just get to punish them. Like, if they try to, especially imagine just blocking for 1 card to save 1 card and then you just get deckened.
Oftentimes, that's the strategy. You attack a rested character a bunch of times, you drain their hand, and then you Vanderdecken, pop it, bounce it back to hand with leader, and then swing at face 2 more times.
Disrespectful. No, I get it. I see the vision. Yeah. Okay. So on a scale from 1 to 10, how good do you think the card was? Because you played a lot of Emu, but I know you played 2 Ace and like a Zoro. So how, on a scale from 1 to 10,
relevant.
how important?
It was relevant in Zoro, and I would say that its importance was about a 7 out of 10 because you're able to answer that 6 cost law. In my case, my opponent played out a Cavendish, which if it survived to the next turn, is just unlimited value. Especially with the Restand event and being able to get that 2 Dawn back up for like a Koshiro or a Search. But where it really shined was the Ace matchups. One of the things, like it's probably your most difficult matchup on this deck list, and one of the ways to kind of survive the onslaught is to protect your life heavily, give up blockers, give up all the counter in your hand, and then towards the end of the game when they're, spitting out that 10k blocker or the tax spirit or whoever, you can Hody on 10, rest their character, rest their Dawn or whatever they have up, Vanderdecken, swing with leader, and then bounce the Vanderdecken and still be able to swing with Hody.
And an important thing to note there is if you just bounce Vander, he broke even, right? Because you played a card and then you had to trash a card, but then you get the card back. So, you really are only down 1 card. So it's not a true 2-card combo, but he kind of, like, in a way, just replaces himself, which is really cool. So that makes sense.
I don't think there's an excuse to run a ton of 2Ks. I run 4 of the Hachan 2Ks and 3 of the Kawamatsu 2Ks.
He's supposed to be a Kappa, by the way.
He should be a Kappa. But are Kappas fishmen? That's a philosophical question.
Asking the real question.
Right. Hard-hitting journalism over here. These are both searchable off of Perona, and they're both targets for Vanderdecken, and again, there are both 2Ks. They're slash, so they can be protected for Koshiro by Koshiro if you do happen to play them out. And then the other 2K you have is this 3-cost Tashigi.
Busted.
Which is good. Yeah, I think everyone's familiar with it, but obviously this is anti-KO or anti-removal period. If one of your green characters would be removed from the field in any way, you can instead rest Tashigi to prevent that. And then that brings me to the question I probably get the most often, which is why I do not run the 6-cost law and play the OP1 5-cost law instead. I tested the 6-cost law extensively at the beginning of the format to see whether or not that was something that could solve some of the math problems I was having in the deck. And ultimately, the conclusion I came to was that in order to get the maximum value from the 6-cost law, you have to run 5-cost characters, whether that's Yamato, Bonnie, Carrot, Smoker. But you want to maximize that effect to bounce a card from your field and then play a 5-cost out rested. But what I saw, and kind of what I noticed through my testing, was that it was really difficult to have enough characters on the field that you can bounce one for law and then bounce one for leader ability without bouncing the character you just played. Or just skipping out on your leader ability altogether that turn. So I started having to ask myself, like, is this conducive to what the deck is trying to do?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just think that for what the deck is, the fact that when you play Luffy, the 6-cost 7K Luffy from this new set, you restand 4 Dawn, but then you can't play a character 5-cost or higher.
Yeah.
If you want to maximize that 6-cost law and you have to have the 5-cost characters in your deck, then you're really conflicting with playing the Luffy, because you'll have characters in your hand that you can't play because of its ability. So I decided personally that the best way to attack this current format is to go a little smaller. Have that law that can bounce the Peronas and play out a Vivi or play out a Koshiro or play out a Vanderdecken, and then being able to kind of bounce that card guilt-free with leader ability without being like, dang, I just bounced the Bonnie back to my hand, or I just bounced the Yamato back to my hand.
Yeah, and then for 6-2, it's kind of like a draw 3, right? Because you bounce back your Perona Searcher, you'll play the Law, you'll bounce back your Perona, and then you're going to play out the V, which is going to draw 2, but then you're going to play the Perona, which like replaces itself. So in a way, it's almost like you're drawing 3, because you're going to see 3 new cards, and then you're going to be able to continue to bounce that Perona again, making her a genuine +1 instead of just breaking even, because she's gotten twice the amount of value, which is kind of again where this deck can snowball. Is the same cards are going to continually generate value. One thing that it can, if your opponent is very good, like in the similar ways as like Law, they're going to track your hand, and as they should, because you're going to search a decent amount, and you're also going to return the same cards to your hand, and you play pretty slim, right? You want to stay at that like 5-6 card range.
Exactly.
So they're going to know potentially like 3 cards in there if you've searched, and bounce probably 2, because you're not going to continually bounce the same card. You're going to bounce something else at some point. So, and then unless you counter with it, right, they're going to keep a lot of knowledge, because you're usually bouncing and replaying the same thing, because that's where the good value is.
Yeah. Part of that is the reason that most of my deck is base rarity. Mixed rarity would just give my opponent way too much hand information.
I've had people give me way too much hand information. So I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
Unless I can get a full playset of whatever card it is that I wanted to max rarity, I'm going base rarity just to preserve some kind of, sense of mystery in my hand, because otherwise, if I'm bouncing 2 different Luffys, or, these, I can't part with these. They're too pretty, but
yeah,
everything else, everything else is either all one art or another. But that's going to get us to the end of the deck list, which is I played this Zoro, which is a 2K. This ended up just being a 2K the entire tournament. I would say that if you like this deck list and you want to add some flair, this is definitely something that you can replace for a different 2K, or just another card entirely. I think between the Mihawk 2Ks, the Hachan 2Ks, the Tashigi 2Ks, and the Tamamatsu 2Ks, you have enough 2Ks in the deck. I didn't run into many other green decks. For the most part, I do want to say that I had an extremely favorable bracket. Emu is my best matchup, and I saw 6 of them. Ace is my most difficult matchup, still very winnable. but I only saw 2 of them. And then Zoro's also a favorite matchup for me, but I only saw 1.
Yeah. You think Zoro's favored?
With this list, yes. And a big part of the reason is the 7-cost Luffy. He's really easy to defend. So even if he gets rested off of Tashigi, as long as you're also running Arlong, it's searchable. It really stops Zoro in his tracks. And then the double attack, Zoro tends to be a bit fragile, so getting those swings off, I mean, it could be a race to the finish sometimes. Like, it's a very straightforward matchup. It's just like who can swing on who the most times.
Yeah, that makes sense because I mean they're true to the point, right? They're both Zoro decks. They both want to hit your face a lot, but that makes sense because like obviously being a 4-life leader, you are susceptible, especially with the restand event. It's a lot easier because usually you want to take the first life anyways just to get additional resources. So, and a lot of times
Exactly.
you find yourself 3-life leader, and it's like okay, like and all they're playing are rest events and restand events, and that's like. The biggest thing is keeping them off of you in the mid game, which is because once they can only establish for so long, then they have to just smack your face, and every swing that they can have in addition to smacking your face gives them advantage. And so, but of course, right, Arlong is gonna stop them. And then you mentioned the Luffy a lot. Really excited to kind of like talk about that as well, but I don't want to jump too far ahead. But really would like to dive in there once we get there.
I run a 1-of pudding. It's pudding. It's good.
Best
you want
card.
to see it? It's one of the absolute best cards. Some people ask me why I only run 1. What I tend to see is the amount of pressure Zoro generates. Almost always your opponent's going to be at 5 cards or less. It's really hard to keep a big hand against Zoro Sanji because of its multitude of swings. So pudding a lot of times ends up being a 1K counter. And in Ace, Aces are so used to the mirror that they're really good at keeping their hand regulated somewhat in the early game, where pudding may be the best play available to you. It's not until that late game, if you're really patient, you hang on to the pudding until the very, very end, that you can start striking lethal blows and get their hands down from like 8 or 9 cards to 5, and then all of a sudden they have to defend 4, 6K swings. And a matchup where they had the game in hand, now they're on lethal next turn and they have to play defensive. So pudding is really great, but again, a lot of times she's just a 1K, and in most matchups she will be. So I only have her at 1. You see her more often than you think because of the Cavendish cycle and the VV draw. So I don't know. It felt good at 1. I don't think that there was any time where I was like, man, I wish I had pudding. And there was more times where I was like, I'm just going to pitch this pudding than there were where I was like needing it,
Right, and you only played 2 Ace, right? So pudding is like it's really the best card for Aces because they get so many cards in hand. So especially like early, if they take the first life, they'll draw a draw. So then it just creates a beautiful opportunity to pudding. And then even if you want, right, pudding could swing twice too, or you can just return it back and get the counter and potentially pudding later when like pushing for any kind of lethal. So a lot of opportunities there, but I think it's mostly for like blue matchups or any kind of like maybe even Rayleigh, like any kind, because I've heard of some Rayleighs, I've seen some Rayleighs kind of doing good. So
another deck that it does really well in is like pretty much anything yellow. Depending on how good Bonnie becomes, and if we ever get that Roger promo and that goes up in popularity, then pudding is really good in that. Pudding is also really good against Sabo. Right now, I'm just going to keep it at 1 because of the current popularity of decks like Emu and Zoro, where it doesn't have a ton of value. But it's definitely something where you could mess with the ratios. I wouldn't be mad if I saw a deck list with 3 puddings and maybe no Zoros. But yeah, that's definitely a strong card, but for right now, I'm just keeping it at 1.
got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Deadman's Game. Yeah. Deadman's Game is pretty self-explanatory. You tap 4 Dawn and rest 2 things.
Busted.
You can also use it for counter. I think I used it for counter as many times as I use it to rest. Not really much to say about that. It is one of the strongest cards in green. It rivals Odie for like stapleness, if that's a word. And then I think the card that everyone is kind of excited to talk about, me and you, is this 6 cost Luffy. This card is incredible in this deck. I don't have. I find myself at a lack of words for how good it is in this deck and in this format. It's a 6/7, so obligatory, but it misses Mars, so you could play it and not get Mars. It is 7,000, so it's restandable, and then the on-play effect, which is if your leader is multicolor, you restand 4 Dawn. That effect is incredible. There was times in some of my matches where I am on my 8 Dawn turn. I have maybe one character on the field. My opponent's done a really good job of controlling the early game. And then I play 6 cost Luffy and restand 2 Dawn. I have 6 Dawn left. Then I play 4 cost Zoro and restand 2 Dawn, so I have 4 Dawn left. Then I play Vivi and draw 2 cards, so I have 1 Dawn left. And then I swing with leader, bounce the Vivi, and I have swung 3 times and set up 2 characters on 8 Dawn, and of which are 6/7 and 5/5 or 4/5.
We love a good 6/7.
Yeah, we love a good 6/7.
Yeah, and I think so. What interests me the most, of course, is like obviously the effect is broken, but it has another line of text that says double attack, and we're in a very blocker-esque heavy format. And then, of course, right, it would make sense. Like you get ace the 2, you could potentially keep them at 2 and then swing with that to put them to like 0 and just put them in a very weird spot. But how often it has double attack come up for you on this card?
Yeah, I think outside of Yamato leader, double attack is incredibly rare in the One Piece game. You have the OP1 5-cost Yamato, you have like Douglas Bullet, which is kind of relevant right now, and then you have this Luffy. And I think one of the things that Luffy does is it creates this inherent pressure, almost like a character with Banish, where it's too much damage not to counter out of. So the first swing always has to be 7 because of leader ability. But then the second swing can be as tall as you want. So if on your 6 Dawn turn you set up the Luffy, and then on your 8 Dawn turn you swing 7, play out a character to do whatever, and then swing with your leader and restand the Luffy. If your opponent is like ace and they're still at 3 life, and you jam like an 11k attack at it, and they're forced to take 2 life, it puts them in the situation where they have to decide whether or not they play I Am Whitebeard and take a life, because now they're at lethal. And you can Hody them, or you could Deadman's Game them and, kind of chip away at their hand. So the double attack is incredibly relevant. I would say that that is one of the really kind of best features of Luffy, outside of the value it creates, where you can play it for essentially 2 Dawn. That restand double attack and the second attack being as tall. So a lot of times what you could do, and what I did for my opponents, was leave a ton of Dawn up. So swing really small, like 5s and 6s, or, depending on the leader, but swing as low as you possibly can, and then leave like 5 Dawn up when you restand Luffy. Because then whatever the last attack is, they like have to counter out of it aggressively, But if the next attack is a double attack with 11k, they have no way of taking it, of countering out of it, and they have to give you like more, because it turns their game plan off, Yeah. So I love it. Some people say to run it at 4. I think you saw enough of it at 3 with the cycle of Cavendish and the draw of Vivi. I wouldn't say that there was ever a time where I needed it and didn't have it. So. And it's good to see at any Dawn turn, whether it's your 6 Dawn, 7 Dawn, 8 Dawn. Luffy is always a great play. And then obviously Hody. Hody's been around for a long time. Every green deck runs it. You rest 2 of any cards, Dawn or characters, and then you take your own life and you have Rush. And it's a 7/8. So.
Yeah, best rusher ever printed, low key.
Yeah, I mean. Do you remember when there was talks about the ban list prior to the Lin and And
Kata? Yeah, I do. I do. I made a
Kata,
video about it.
oh
I
yeah,
put Hody on
oh
that
okay,
list.
Odie low key probably should have been
Well, like
banned.
it's so weird too, though, because Hody was like incredibly good in the context of UP Luffy specifically. Like, it's a really good card into that deck with the blockers and, of course, the Dawn. So it's like it's less good in other like formats. Like, there's totally like the argument. Again, I think bar for bar, especially like when people don't have answers to 8 cost kid, and you can just 8 cost kid, then take your own life, creating more value. I think that's when it really becomes like a problem.
Yeah,
But I think overall, like, I don't think the card was ever too unfair. I think like, and the worst part is like UP Luffy was already incredibly unfair, and it was a card that was unfair to them. So I'm good. I'm for the most part, I'm good with Hody.
it was the bully of bullies.
Yes, yes, exactly. When we needed a hero, we got a villain.
I love it. But
But
yeah, man. Just kind of parting thoughts on the Treasure Cup in general. I know a lot of people say that this is like a triangle meta, and I mean, obviously it is, right? The popularity of the 3 decks, they're going to make up the majority of any major event that you go to. But in my opinion, this is more of a skill meta than ever before. You could really win with a deck like Zoro Sanji or even OP5 uh, Sabo or Lim. Um, I don't think that, I think we're going to be surprised with some of the top 4 finishes in Miami and in some of the events kind of coming up in the near future.
yeah, I'm bullish on Lim. I'm bullish. I'm big on any deck that can play Law Magellan. That just, and then you play another Law, then you just play Magellan. I would just throw up right there. But let's go. I know you don't have too much more time, so there are a couple questions I kind of want to ask you, and we'll just kind of run through these. But so I know you kind of mentioned it, but so best matchup is just, you think for sure Emu. Is there any other like Emu, Zoro? Like, what are the best matchups?
Emu is going to be your most favored. I think the early aggression, especially if you see that like Mihawk Cavendish and Mihawk Zoro, and you're able to see your Koshiros to protect your board, you're golden. The pressure is too much, the card count is too much. Um, it it's just like a really difficult matchup for your opponent to navigate. I think in general, the extra attack with leader ability, it's almost like really difficult to account for. Even though you know it's coming, it's been there the whole game. You like almost are never prepared for it, and I don't know why, but its ability to kind of just like power through the 2 blockers every turn gives it that edge. It's like,
Yep.
okay, you have 2 blockers, I have 2 characters. Normally that would even out, but not in this time.
Yeah, and they're going to get rid of them every turn. So if you just rest them, they're gone the next turn because they are going to use their 10 drop to gain the advantage again. So, and then you just rest them again. So I can see that. And then, so what do you think is the worst matchup? What is the one thing that you just don't want to sit across from you?
Um, what? Yeah, I mean, I don't know how often you'll see it, but Yellow Bonnie with that with that freeze boa that just stops your leader ability.
Mm.
Not being able to swing with your leader is kind of rough, especially when they can chain it back to back to back.
Yeah, the 5/7.
Uh, yeah, the 5/7 boa from PRB2. But I think within the current meta, the most difficult matchup you're gonna have is gonna be that ace. You know, if you're playing out a 4 cost and then they Atmos it, and then you play out the 4 cost or a 5 cost like Law, and then they Jozu it, and then it's just kind of like, oh, I haven't had a body on the field this whole game.
Yeah.
And then you have 8 cards in hand because you've been taking damage and getting your cards bounced back, and then they putting you. It's really difficult to come back from that. But that's a big ask from any deck to see those exact cards in that exact order. They're all super searchable though, so it's not impossible, but I think that matchup does become your most difficult one. If you're able to survive the early game and keep your life relatively healthy, if you're able to be at 3 life by the time they're at their 8th on turn, and you can kind of weather that first 10 drop. I think that at that point you start to gain the advantage. Multiple 6k swings at life. If they block with their Whitebeard, you immediately KO it with Vanderdecken. Then over the course of the game, you're just gonna have the ability to survive better.
Got it.
But that is definitely the most difficult matchup within the current meta. The thing that I love about the leader though is that it's not like an auto loss. It doesn't feel like Lucci going into BY or Lucci going into Blackbeard, you know?
Yeah, that's all. That you literally can't ask for much more when you're playing a deck. And then, so what are you mulliganing for? Like, what is like? We talk a lot of VV, we talk a lot of potential Mihawks. Like, what are you looking for in your starting hand? How do we get the ball rolling?
You're always going to want to take into consideration who the opponent is. For emus, you really want to see that Mihawk combo in the first, opening hand, whether it's Mihawk and then a 4-cost, or Mihawk and a Perona, so you could search a 4-cost. And against Zoro, you would love to see 2Ks. Get a 4-cost out there, knowing like a Cavendish, knowing that it's going to get rested, but being able to protect it and then draw back up with VV is one of the pathways to victory. And then obviously Arlong in that matchup. And then against Ace, you really need to see that Luffy. You need to see that Luffy, and it needs to be on curve. If you could take second from Ace and play the Luffy on 6, and kind of pair it with Tashigi so it doesn't get bounced back to your hand, you're okay.
Yeah.
Whatever happens after that, you're okay.
Yeah, Tashigi is huge. Tashigi, like that's always my big fear against Zoro too, right? And then you of course get the Dawn back, so you don't even like Zoro. They have to establish it a turn before, whereas you can do it all in the same turn, which
just right away.
Yeah. And then you just can't get and then the body's gonna stay there for the rest of the game, and then potentially any other green bodies too. So.
Yeah. No, and I know we're talking about Zoro Sanji right now, but in my opinion, I don't know why Zoro isn't running Luffy and just relying more on that Kuina. But that's a conversation for a different day.
I will say this: somebody played 10 Shank. My last round was a Zoro, and they played 10. They said I'll go second, and I just knew something was wrong there. I'm like, you've won too many games for this to be right. And then I missed Jozu on curve, and then on 10 he just plays 10 Shanks, and I swiftly died. He goes 12-12, then he goes 12-12-12. I'm like, yeah. I was like, I was never living.
No, that's rough. That's a rough one.
Cool. And then so, just kind of close things out, what do you think most people do wrong with this deck? Because I know there's a lot of Zoro Sanji believers. Where do you think the biggest mistake or mistakes Zoro Sanji players are making, and how can they kind of tighten that up who are wanting to play this?
I will say that it is a very skill rewarding deck. I've been on this deck since OP8, and even during this last Treasure Cup, there were lines of play that I saw for the very first time. Because it's an aggressive deck, you have this idea in your head where you could just go for game, right? Where you're like swing, 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 and then next turn I can Hody and just win. But I think that the biggest piece of advice I could offer anyone who wants to pick up this deck is to just give it one more turn. If you could survive the crackback, give it one more turn. You're winning the battle of attrition in every single matchup. You're getting more swings than they have natural defenses. So whether it's Emu and they're blocking, then giving you a 1-cost event, then taking a life, or they're blocking, then giving you most of their hand. As long as you're not going to die on the crackback, hold off on that Hody, hold off on that DMG, save it for next turn.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Well, I super appreciate it. Anything, any shout outs, anything like that? Anyone you want to say hello to the people at home?
Yeah, big shout out to my brother on this. We really tackled this deck list together. We played Rank Sim and critically analyzed all the plays, and kind of that play testing and those second set of eyes really helped me determine that what cards were a little bit of bait in the deck and a little bit of like, oh yeah, this is definitely helping you in this matchup. And I don't know if this card is that valuable in the deck, period. You know, that's how I kind of cut the 6-cost Laws. I cut the 1-cost Otamas. I cut the Yamatos. And a lot of that just came from, you know, especially if it's something that you are attached to. You know, if it's something that, like, I've been playing it from set to set to set, and there are certain cards where I'm like, well, this has never treated me wrong. I'm going to keep it. If someone else could come in and just be like, well, it's not really helping you in this format, it's kind of good to have that second pair of eyes. Shout out to Guildhall. It's the store that I sponsors, where the GH and GH Bono comes from.
Okay.
Yeah, good people at Guildhall. It's a store in South Florida. If anyone is a new player or is interested in playing in some One Piece locals, come to Guildhall. We have tournaments on Fridays, Sundays, and then today is actually off meta, which I am a little bit late to.
Oh man, well, you know, I'll let you get out of here, but I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.